tech, venture capital, impact investment, and information technology, and all of them very successfully. He's an expert, often quoted by the world's best media publications, and is the go-to expert in cases of technology and finance in India. Mr. Sinha has held the office of Minister of State for Finance and Civil Aviation and is a second-term member of Parliament in Lok Sabha. He is the chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance with an oversight of ministries of Corporate Affairs, Statistics and Program Implementation, Niti Aayog, and responsible for RBI, SEBI, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board, Insurance and Pension Regulatory Authority. Well, all of us can really read a lot about Mr. Sinha online, also in Wikipedia. I would like to really utilize this time to engage with Professor Sinha and Mr. Sinha and ask him little questions, which most of us, all of the participants, are eagerly waiting for. Good evening, Mr. Sinha. Welcome to the show. I hope you are doing well, sir.
Good evening, Madhavendra, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. Good evening to Professor Rao as well, and good evening to all my friends from the IIT community who've joined us this evening. I must say that in the lockdown, these webinars, these video calls have become extremely popular. I seem to be doing one of them virtually every day, but they have proven to be very effective and a great way to stay in touch and to be able to communicate with everyone. And of course, this evening's call is of great significance because it is for my beloved IIT community, which has of course shaped me and made me what I am. So I'm very pleased to be with all of you today to talk about what is happening in this Corona world, if you will, Corona ki dunya, and to share some perspectives both on the economy and more generally about leadership during these difficult times. So very pleased, Madhavendra, again, that you were able to put this together, and very pleased that we have a very good turnout of our colleagues from the IIT community. Now, you had all asked me to provide you some starting comments, some opening remarks about where we are right now in this Corona pandemic and the impact it will have on the economy. And as we discuss that, I think it's very important for everyone to recognize that this is not about when the lockdown ends, because a lot of people that I speak to are very preoccupied about is this going to end in mid-May, or is it going to end at the end of May? Because in some ways people think that the moment the lockdown ends, we will resume normal life. And what we need to understand is that this Corona pandemic and people like Bill Gates and many others had been actually warning us about this for a long time, is very much a long-term affair. It is not really a situation that is only about the lockdown and it will be quickly be finished after that. This is a situation that's going to last for quite a while. I think the first, sort of trigger or the first important event is when this lockdown is lifted and with the appropriate sort of social distancing norms and so on, we can resume some of our normal life. But until we have a cure, which is perhaps 3 to 6 months away, we are not going to get back to more than 80 or 90% of our normal life. So when we get a cure, that's when 80 to 90% of our normal life will be resumed. And that's probably 3 to 6 months away. And we won't get back to 100% of normal, the big weddings, IPL, going to a restaurant, all the things that we took for granted. We are not going to get back to that until the vaccine is ready and most of us get vaccinated. Now that is probably going to take at least 18 months, and that's a best case. So, getting back to 100% of normal is about 18 months away when the vaccine is ready, it's gone through clinical trials, and everybody has been appropriately inoculated. So this is going to be a long drawn out affair. It's obviously going to change the way we live our lives. It's also going to have a very significant impact on the economy as well. And just to put that in perspective, let's go back again and think about the global financial crisis, which happened in 2008 and 2009. The global financial crisis had a huge impact on the global economy and also on India. But the global financial crisis was largely focused on the US and in Europe, and it largely pertained only to the financial sector. The corona pandemic is something that's going to impact all countries and all sectors. So in some ways, it's at least 2 or 3 times more intense as an economic exogenous shock than the global financial crisis was. So this is really a very, very profound event in our sort of economic situation. And that is why people like the IMF and others have said that this is as big an economic shock as in some ways the Great Depression, which was unprecedented and almost 100 years ago. So this is a very, very serious economic event that has happened. And of course, it's going to have demand destruction, which is kind of the first order impact. Revenues are going to come down, demand is going to come down. Then it's going to have an effect on the financial system. It's going to have an effect on exports. A lot of our economy is exports, but many of our export markets are in difficult shape. So exports are going to dry up. And then there is another sort of knock-on effect, which is that some of the more fragile economies that are commodity dependent, those that depend on oil, for example, for most of the experts, they are going to have trouble. So this is a very, very serious, sort of economic event, and we will have to deal with it over the next 18 months or so. So it's not something that's going to go away very, very quickly. And in all of this, the medical breakthroughs are going to be key to be able to take this through. Now, some of you might know that, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote an article saying that science alone triumphs. And we can see through this corona pandemic, all of us are scientists, engineers, how important our education and our thinking with respect to science and technology is when the world grapples with a problem that is this profound, this difficult. It's only science, whether it is through a cure, whether it's through testing, whether it's through a vaccine, that can actually give us a large-scale answer to the problems that we are facing. And frankly, it was science that told us that this was a virus that had come from Wuhan, that this was a virus that the genome could be sequenced, that then we could figure out a way to do the testing, how the protein receptors work. It was all the science that underlies life sciences that has enabled us to respond as quickly as we have. So this is something that is demonstrating yet once again how important science is.
So, Mr. Sinha, you have really, in a sense, summed up most of the important things. It is very essential for people at this point in time to really know what lies ahead. But also, I was reading in the recent edition of The Economist, where Mr. Bill Gates has also written about how most of the developed countries would have reached their peak by end of this month and assume that probably they'll return to normal by December. But that's not going to be very likely because until people are vaccinated, these things are not going to improve. But Mr. Sinha, to begin with, what our participants want me to begin with asking you is, anybody who looks at the profile, the first question that he'll be tempted to ask you is, how have you done it? Starting from the IIT itself, you know that for every 100,000 people, there is one seat. And then going on to Harvard Business School and the corporate world, you have really done successfully well. And then even as a parliamentarian, you have held the most important portfolios. So all your life, I think you have some kind of a master key for success. You have really walked the tightrope of success with finesse. Could you please tell us and all our participants what has been your recipe of success and how they can emulate what you have done?
Well, Madhavendra, you're being very generous with your praise. Thank you very much. You've sort of said some very nice things, but the reality is that you kind of stumble through life, right? I mean, there is no necessarily a recipe for success. You do your best. Certain things open up, certain opportunities come your way, and you just try to understand what is expected of you, what defines success, and then you try and deliver on that. And for me, and what I tell my children and all the people who work for me, the big learning has been rule number one, and this is what I tell everyone. And the rule number one is something that is age old, that comes from our ancient scriptures as well. And for me, rule number one is it's not about you. It's not about you. And the other way of thinking about it is, as we say in Sanskrit, seva parmo dharam. So you really seva bhav se, with the idea of serving others and really being of help and being of value to others. Because it's not about you. It's not about your ego. It's not about your success. It is not about what you have achieved in life. It's all about what you can help other people achieve, what you can help other people accomplish, what you can help other people realize out of life. I think that is the key to really having a life of purpose and a life of fulfillment. It's really making people around you as successful as they can be and being committed to their happiness and their success. So I think if you apply that formula, you'll find things always seem to kind of move along.
That's really very profound wisdom, that the principle you have told us. I think all of us should emulate this principle, that it's not about you. I think I'm going to steal that line from you, and I'm going to go tell it to as many people that as much I can. So, Mr. Sinha, so see, these are the times when people are very anxious. They really don't know what lies ahead. And I don't know, whenever this dispensation of COVID ends, the world is going to need a whole new set of new leaders. Not only new leaders, but leaders with a whole set of new skill sets, a lot of innovation and ingenuity, and most of all, enormous courage. And it is the senior leaders like you who can actually give them a peek into the kaleidoscope of tomorrow, what exactly lies ahead. So if we were to tell our young aspiring leaders of today what they should start now, that will come in handy, or that will prepare them for the things that lie ahead. What exactly lies ahead, what they should do now. So if you can...
I mean, obviously you've asked a number of questions. So let me really simplify it and really make it quite easy for everyone. Yes, it's a very complicated world. There are a lot of changes happening. And I'm now 57 years old. I graduated from IIT Delhi in 1985.
You don't look like that.
Aravali Hostel. You know, what has happened since the time I graduated, and we just did our, our 35th reunion recently. What I have learned is that, you have to continuously keep learning. That is very, very important. Because just in my lifetime, I have seen, 4 or 5 major global events, global crises. For example, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Then, of course, we saw 9/11 and the dot-com bust. Then we saw the global financial crisis. And now we're seeing
Cold War, and a Cold War also. Yes.
So all of these things I have seen in my own lifetime and experienced them as a professional, as an adult. And what I've learned through that is that things will completely change. You may be committed to a career, or you may be committed to a set of skills and understanding of the world, and suddenly the world completely changes on you. And to avoid becoming a dinosaur, you have to be able to adapt, you have to be able to adjust. And you can only do that if you have an open mind and you're curious and you're willing to learn. And that really, in today's day and age, I'm finding with young people, my children are among them, that they are looking to things like YouTube and docuseries to learn about the world. And that's fine. But for me, what's worked, and which I find has become less and less of interest to people, is actually reading. And, I just read a lot, and I spend a lot of time reading. And that's what keeps me up to date with what is happening in the world, and, how we need to make sense of the world, etc. So learning is very important.
If I could ask you just about 3 skill sets that people should start preparing for right now to basically be able to adapt for the future, what would those 3 skill sets be? Like we can say that cloud computing could be one of them.
No, but again, Madhavendra, that is, again, we don't have to get into a particular domain. There are more fundamental skills. The first one I already told you, rule number 1 is about humility, right? Don't take yourself too seriously. Learn from others. Be prepared to give to others. Make other people successful. So humility is extremely important. The second one, which I told you about, is learning. You have to be prepared to reinvent yourself, learn, find good sources of learning, good people, good mentors, learn from them. So learning is a very important skill as well, right? And then the third thing that I often talk about is competence and building your competence. And, building competence has to be something which means that you really have to push yourself. You really have to work hard. Vince Lombardi was a famous American football coach, and he had a very famous saying where he said that winning is a habit. Winning is a habit. You don't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to win. You win day in and day out. And if you just change winning to competence, which means really good at what you're doing, to become good at what you're doing, you have to keep preparing, working hard and pushing yourself. It's painful. It's not easy. It means, staying up late at night or getting up early in the morning, putting in that extra time, putting in that extra effort, pushing yourself. That is what leads to competence. And you never know when your competence will be brought into play, right? So you have to keep preparing. It has to become a habit for you. So humility, learning, and competence. These three things I think are very important in the very turbulent world that we live in.
I think that's a very good lesson for all of us to learn. So, Mr. Sinha, as far as the leadership traits go, nowadays, especially with the young, impressionable millennium generation that we call them, do you really think that they get swayed with the way the people talk behind the mic? Because there are some people who really can use language, oratory, and their body language to influence people just the way they talk. I call that charisma. Do you think being charismatic is an essential attribute of being a good leader? Or do you think there are much more other attributes and being charismatic or being very good at oratory is not really essential for that?
Madhavendra, people have written libraries on leadership. Okay, there are any number of books, any number of research articles on what leadership is. So we don't need to get into that. Anybody can open it up on Google and take a look at all of that. But I think at the end of the day, any leader has to build trust and trust among its followers. And trust, of course, comes from, as I said earlier, your humility, your ability to provide solutions, i.e. your ability to be somebody who can learn and understand, and your competence. So these are very basic fundamental skills that you have to acquire. Once you acquire those skills, you're able to inspire trust in people. And once you can inspire trust in people, people follow you, they trust you, they know what you're saying is in their interest, not in your interest. When they sense that integrity, that compassion from you, then you automatically acquire the charisma. Charisma is something you acquire because of how you conduct yourself. And therefore, just focusing on the very fundamental building blocks of character, of competence, and so on, will automatically get you to charisma.
So, actually, picking up from what you said, Mr. Sinha, about one should be able to trust their leaders. So, also, like this American leadership coach, Mr. Goldsmith, has said that leadership is a contact sport. In the present dispensation, when people are really not meeting each other in the corporates, also they're working from home, that intimate relationships that people had with their people in the offices, that's missing actually. So in these times, because it takes really an intimate sharing of physical space with people to understand them inside and out, to understand their nuances, their attributes, and their emotions and everything, which really connects to the people. But when people, everybody is working from home, they're not really meeting everybody. How do you build trust with your team, and how do you make sure that whatever is being done with integrity and honesty, and that everything can be done as if you are done on regular
That's a very good point, Madhaven. That's very very true. What you're saying is that today, in this kind of virtual world we are living in because of the lockdown, it's very difficult to be able to build those strong, enduring, trusted relationships, because you are obviously just coming through on a screen, and it is very difficult. Now, as I said, hopefully we'll get to a point where with social distancing in a few months we can get back and being in offices together, and so on, and once again interact at a personal level. So this is a temporary thing, and during this temporary thing, we just have to keep doing what we've always done, which is being there for people. While of course doing a video call is not as good as being there in person, but it is still some ways there. So let's use the tools we have right now. Let's make the most of them, while still recognizing that they are by no means perfect. We are social animals. Human beings crave contact, they crave connection, and it's difficult to do that virtually. But because that's the best we have right now, let's use these tools and become adept at good at these tools, because that's what we have to work with right now. But I can tell you that, while I totally agree that as human beings, we like to be in the same physical space as others, I think we can achieve 80 or 90% of what we want to achieve simply through video calls, connections, phone calls, being there. Yes, we have to work a little bit harder at it, but then of course we don't have to do the commute and the travel and everything else, the overhead that goes with physical space as well. So it's, you know, it's a bit of a trade-off, but as long as we work at it, I think we can almost get there.
Mr. Sinha, would like to bring in Professor Ramgopal Rao now. But before that, I just want to ask you a very pertinent question that has been running through our minds of late. Because you see, there are like movies like Contagion, and recently there's a movie that's it's a blockbuster on Netflix called The Shining, which actually shows the effects that solitude and isolation can really have on people's minds. So it's about the mental health. Although people can do a lot to maintain themselves physically healthy, but what should they do to maintain their mental health as well? I mean, they should remain they should always have a sense of purpose. But now, since they're sitting at home, that sense of purpose is missing. For most of the people, they're not working. Even some people who have lost their employment. So how do they really remain in that healthy state of mind?
No, these are very difficult problems for sure, no doubt about it. And we've seen what happens to Jack Nicklaus in The Shining.
Exactly.
Hopefully that is a super, super extreme type of situation and nobody, ends up there. I pray and hope that doesn't happen. But of course, these are very difficult times and they extract a real toll on people. And therefore, it's very important to reach out to your loved ones, to your family, to spend time with them, to take this time that we have right now to strengthen our family ties and really, really value those. At the same time, it's also important that we carve out space for ourselves as well, whether it's yoga or meditation or long walks, whatever you can do to keep yourself feeling mentally in balance, agile, in a sense of relative tranquility. I think that's very important too. And there are any number of good techniques that are available to be able to do that. But it's very important to find that balance within yourself and with your loved ones.
Very rightly said, Mr. Sinha. I think there are a lot of ways. Even the schools are being run regularly online, for online yoga courses, meditation. I mean, there's a lot which if they really want, they can do to maintain themselves. Mr. Sinha, now it's time. I would like to call in Professor Ramgopal Rao, who is the director of IIT Delhi. Professor, can we have you online, please?
Yeah. So.
Hello, Professor Rao. Good evening.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, again, customary to introduce our guests for the participants. So Professor Rao has an engineer's dream profile. We can say without doubt that he is a pioneer of nanotechnology in India. He has 43 patents, which 11 has been licensed for commercial production. He has numerous awards and honors, and he has published more than 450 publications. Under his leadership, IIT Delhi has been conferred the prestigious Institute of Eminence and has ranked among the top 50 academic institutes in the world. He has held many startups during his period as director and has been at the forefront of even community service during the times of COVID. So I welcome you, Professor Rao, to kindly take this introduction forward. So in the meantime, I'll look up if some people have posted some questions now, and I'll be back in some time, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Sinha, for taking me with all of us today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I also, your recent article, Science Alone Trumps, is a great one. In fact, we all shared it very widely, and the entire academic community, believes that you are our champion in the government system. So I think we all have lots of expectations from you that way. And you also said that science is the only way the country can assume that leadership role in the future. So we have to strengthen our science. I also would like to tell you that I think this COVID situation has also turned out to be a self-discovery for us. If you just look at the IITs alone in the last 3 months, I see almost like 200 new projects that have got started, essentially to help the country to deal with the COVID crisis. At IIT Delhi, just a few days ago, we got the ICMR approval for a very low cost detection kit, which is PCR based, almost below 500 rupees. And ICMR said this is 100% accurate 100% sensitive kind of a thing, and below 500 rupees, as I said. So I think that should be a game changer. And once ICMR approved, there are at least 10 big corporates which are approaching us now. They all want to commercialize that, and we are following a open licensing model. We want to give a non-exclusive license to all of these companies, and within 2 weeks, we actually want to put it out into the society. I think these are the hidden kind of talents IIT system has, and there are people working on ventilators, people working on PPEs. Our startups have also been playing a very critical role in dealing with this crisis. I think looking at it from the government point of view, I think since we have been in the thick and all of this, where do you see now the Indian academia needs to go from here? I think everyone has been talking about India should become that Vishwa Guru kind of a status. I think that is what we need to gain at some point in time. So how do you think, but our education system has mostly been inward looking. I think since we are struggling with just educating our own students, we never had a chance to, look at, educating people from other countries and all of that. But I think this Vishwa Guru status and meeting our own requirements, how do you look at it, from your point of view?
Good evening, Professor Rao, and great to have you on this program. And congratulations on all the remarkable accomplishments that IIT Delhi has been able to achieve in these few short months since the corona pandemic came about. And you're exactly right. If we can have a test which is accurate, and for 500 rupees, it is a game changer for India, because it enables a lot of things to happen that are not possible right now, like taking planes, for instance, right, and taking trains. So we can give people a clean chit of health, and then they can get on a train, and we know that the train is going to be appropriately sanitized. So these are absolute game changers, and this is really the power of science and technology applied for the public good, that we can solve these very difficult intractable problems and do it as well. But coming to your question now, Professor Rao, I think this is a wake-up call. Corona, the pandemic, is a wake-up call for us. And in fact, just today, I have an article out again where I've said that as far as life sciences are concerned, we have clearly been underinvesting, and we need to overinvest now on life sciences, because the cost of not doing enough is so enormous, so enormous. Just to give you some numbers, global GDP is about $90 trillion, would have been $90 trillion. If we would have grown by 3% this year. Global GDP will be down minus 3%. So there's a 6% swing. A 6% swing on $90 trillion means $5.4 trillion of economic output gone, because we didn't get ahead of the curve as far as this pandemic is concerned. And the numbers for India are massive as well. We have 200 lakh crores as our GDP. We would have grown by 6%. Let's say we don't grow this year, we are flat. Then we have lost 12 lakh crores of economic output, for example. Again, because we have not invested sufficiently in life sciences and in sciences to be able to get on top of these situations. So it's a wake-up call in the sense that 10,000 crores, 20,000 crores, 30,000 crores, which are very large numbers when we look at them in a sort of a more normal budgeting way. But when we look at them in terms of the risks that we are facing, then these numbers are not as significant. And that's why, as you know, I have been arguing for a long time that we need to have some massive research programs in India, 10 or 15 massive research programs, pick the areas, whether it's artificial intelligence or quantum computing or virology or immunology or genomics or computational biology, whichever areas we think are important. Let's pick those areas, let's get behind them with multi-year programs, giving each of those 2,000, 3,000 crores as multi-year funding, 400-500 crores a year. And let's pick the best researchers through expert panels, give them research grants so that they can build up their labs, they can build up their graduate students, and they can do whatever is necessary to be at the cutting edge of science and technology, so they can work on these big problems for India and know that they are the best in the world at it. Because this is really what is going to help us in the future, not just in saving us from a corona pandemic, but also finding solutions for growth, for greener technologies, etc., which are some of our other priorities as well. But as we all know, as people who love science and engineering and technology, that it starts there. I mean, all of human productivity, all of human growth has come from scientific solutions to big human problems that we faced. So I think this is a wake-up call that we need to invest more. It may seem expensive, but when we look at it in light of what the costs are, it's actually a very, very cheap thing to do. It's a very good insurance premium to pay relative to the problems that we might face.
Mr. Sinha, one of the typical ways governments look at is where hunger is a problem. I think nothing else seems to really matter anymore. All the government budgets need to go towards solving some of these issues, and education often gets the least kind of a priority, which is what has been the case with India for many decades now. I think I think, as you are saying, the science is what we need to put at the forefront now. So I think you think the government will relook at this entire science budgets now and start putting education as one of the top priorities, research as a top priority. Unless that happens, I think science also takes a much longer time to pay back. And I think since everybody is in a hurry to solve problems, I think get the returns on their investments, even from that point of view, often science seems to get a backseat. I think, how does one convince governments? I mean, how do we even pitch to the powers be that this is what we need to be doing?
Well, obviously, we are all pushing in that direction, Professor Rao. And as I said, this corona pandemic, I think, has been a big wake-up call. It just helps us understand what our priorities should be, can be, must be. And let me tell you the story of the Jenner Institute. You may have read about the corona vaccine that they're coming up with. So the Jenner Institute has two scientists, I think a Dr. Gilbert and a Dr. Hill, if I remember the names right, who for decades have been working on using different kinds of viruses to be able to develop vaccine. And I think Dr. Hill had been experimenting with this virus for malaria, and he'd been working for decades on coming up with a vaccine for malaria, unsuccessful. But because he had developed all of the technology and all of the genomics to be able to work the RNA of that virus for malaria, he could immediately repurpose it for corona. And that's the way science works, right? We have to be prepared to give people like a Dr. Hill working at the Jenner Institute and Oxford University a lot of money over a long period of time, so that as and when it's required, because they've already been doing all of this work for so many decades, they can solve the problem quickly. And we never know where it's going to come from. That's just the nature of science. We have to just be at the cutting edge. We have to have trained, skilled people, capable people with large groups of graduate students working with them, skilled people working with them. And these things will happen. That's how it's been happening all along. That is the nature of science. That is the nature of technology. It is a slow, laborious, long process, because it is science after all. You have to show it's the truth. You have to make it replicable. You have to prove it. You have to show the counterfactual. This is not easy work, right? It's hard work. But I think because, hopefully our priorities will really start to encompass all of this going forward. I, for one, am certainly pushing it hard. I think, maybe we will be able to get the bandwidth to be able to do this type of work along with all the other priorities we have. It's not either or. I think we can do both. So really we should definitely emphasize this. And as you know, Professor Rao, what I have always emphasized is that our scientific and engineering community should also be given the autonomy and the freedom to be able to engage in this research. I mean, I have friends who worked at Bell Labs and who are working at Microsoft Research or at Google Labs and so on. And they're given just an incredible amount of freedom and autonomy because they are the best at what they do. They're super motivated and they're going to do great work. So just give them the resources and let them figure it out. Why do we have to micromanage them?
Very well said, Mr. Sinha. And also even the IIT Delhi COVID detection kit, there is a group here in the Kusma school which has been working on viruses for 20 years. Now, once the COVID-19 came into picture, they just realigned all of their work to COVID-19. In 3 months, they were able to put out a technology which got patented, which got approved by ICMR. I think that is a long-term kind of a investment that we need to make. This is not just coming back to one of the points which you were mentioning. I can tell you students are really worried right now. I'm sure this, your talk will be listened by many of these students. There is a lot of uncertainty, looming large now. They don't know what will happen to jobs. Many who have got jobs, I think there is also an issue of these companies withdrawing things. How would you tell students to cope with this crisis now? So how do you think, you know, what would you tell your children, for example, that how they should deal with this problem?
No, these are difficult times, Professor Rao. Let's acknowledge the reality that these are difficult times. And there will be significant uncertainty. People will be extremely worried. They worked extremely hard to be where they are, and to suddenly have to confront this uncertainty is a life-altering and very, very threatening set of circumstances. So I totally understand, the anxiety that people are facing right now. That said, I will say that IITians, in particular from IIT Delhi, should not be overly concerned because there are extremely talented, exceptional people at the IITs. The world wants them, the world needs them, particularly as science and technology become even more important. And they will all end up in, I think, good places and do very well and be quite successful, particularly if they think longer term. So yes, you may not get the dream job immediately after graduating from IIT, for example, but if you work hard and you know what you want, eventually you'll be able to find your way there and you'll be able to achieve a lot. One thing that a lot of people have done when they're graduating in a recession is to actually go on and do further studies. That's always a good safety net. So typically what has always been found is that when people graduate in a recession or in difficult economic times, a lot more people go into graduate school. So that opportunity for you is certainly there, is to consider graduate school. So certainly that is a possibility you should consider. And at the same time, just as I was saying earlier to Madhavendra, focus on the important sort of fundamentals: humility, learning, obviously the willingness to work hard, to be competent. And if you work and focus on the fundamentals, because you're all very talented, capable people, you will have an amazingly successful career. But yes, you will go through some anxious times. And I'll just conclude this by saying, please don't think that this is the end of it, which is you get through the corona pandemic and then your career will be smooth forever. That's not how it works. Every 10 years, 12 years, 13 years, there'll be very big disruptions in the global economy. That's really been the way it's been over the last few decades. And so you will see these kinds of disruptions over and over again. And so it's important to be resilient. It's important to maintain your courage and your confidence and know that you're very talented and you'll get through it fine.
I think since this whole debate is also on leadership kind of a thing, I see, so many IITians in leadership roles, you included in the politics kind of a thing. So I think there is something which IITs seem to be doing right, but we don't really seem to know what is that we are doing, that we are able to produce these top-notch leaders in in so many different domains. So what do you think is the success for all of the, I mean, what do you think we are doing right in a way? Because is it just the intelligence that is what pushes them to those roles, or is it something that IITs are doing, from your perspective, that we need to strengthen further so that more and more IITians will be able to occupy such leadership positions?
No, you're exactly right, Professor Rao. I think the IITs have churned out leaders, and I think particularly IIT Delhi in that regard has been particularly successful in churning out very, very successful leaders in virtually every domain. As I look at my class now, 35 years later, we have successful people in every sphere, in every field. So clearly there is something that is happening in the IITs. And I think really, like all good educational institutions, it's a combination of things. Obviously, it starts with JEE. It starts with a very rigorous filtering process, which takes time. So for you to get through JEE, you have to work very hard over a long period of time. You obviously have to be intelligent, but you also have to work very hard over a long period of time because it's so difficult to get in. So that in itself selects for you people who are intelligent and hardworking and who are very motivated. So you start there. Then, of course, you get an excellent education. In some ways, I think the IITs probably deliver the best education in India in terms of the professors, in terms of the resources that we have. So I think that education also makes a difference. We become so much more analytical, so much quicker at absorbing material. So that I think helps us a great deal. And then the third thing I will say is the peer group. The people we are with at IITs, our friends, our colleagues, our friend, sort of competitors. These are all very, very capable people, and we push each other and we really motivate each other to get better in every area. Whether it's academics, whether it's dramatics, whether it's debate, in every sphere, because the pool is so strong, the peer effect, the competition is such that it really pushes us as well. So I think it's that combination of a talented student body, a terrific education, and then an excellent peer group that I think really comes into play. And then I'll add for IIT, I think a special ingredient as well. I think more so than the other IITs, and this particularly in my time was true, which is that IIT Bombay, IIT Madras, IIT Kanpur, even Kharagpur were all quite isolated from the cities. But IIT Delhi was very much plugged into Delhi. Now it's changed a little bit because the cities have grown and Bombay is now very much part of the city and so on. But I think Delhi has always been more plugged in to the city, to the the sort of college festivals, the inter-college competitions and so on. And that's given our people from IIT Delhi a little bit more of an external flair, a little bit more of a sense of being extroverted and so on. And I think that in particular has been a very big bonus for IIT Delhi as well, I would say.
Sinha, I think you are also one unique kind of a person. You have held leadership roles in private industries. Now you're also a leader in the government kind of side. So I think being in the private sector or in the government side, holding these sort of positions, what do you see is the difference? I think for many of our students who have the dilemma of choosing whether to go into the government kind of a sector or the private kind of a sector, how do you see that from a student's point of view?
Well, I think few students, maybe some, but very few students will be thinking of politics. So certainly people will be looking at the private sector or the public sector, which is, can I work
or
for
even the bureaucracy kind of a thing.
And the bureaucracy, the IAS, IPS, etc., civil services. So people will look at it in terms of PSU, civil services, or they will look at it in terms of the private sector. What I have done is very different, because I went from the private sector directly into politics, which is a completely different thing altogether. And I will tell you that really there have been only 2 IITians elected to the Lok Sabha in the entire history. This is the 17th Lok Sabha. And the first Lok Sabha elections were in 1952. But to the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 IITians who have ever been elected to the Lok Sabha. One was Mr. P.D. Rai from Sikkim, which I'm not sure is exactly, competitive politics the way it is to win from the Hindi heartland like I have from Jharkhand. It's a very different thing altogether to be in electoral politics, grassroots politics, and so on. Arvind Kejriwal ji, of course, has won, but he's an MLA in Delhi. He has not won a Lok Sabha election. Manohar Parrikar ji, of course, has won MLA elections, but he was in the Rajya Sabha, as was Mr. Jairam Ramesh. So we've had very well-known, very successful IITians in politics, but not in the Lok Sabha. So it's a very different sort of world. But again, it comes back to just very fundamental sort of qualities, right? Again, it's all about being of service. It is about willing to learn new things. It's always about making sure that what you do well. And if you just master those fundamental qualities, then you can certainly use them in the private sector. You can use it in the public sector as well. So that I think is very transferable. Now, that being said, it is actually a very different world when you're in the private sector and when you're in the public sector. So, I've worked with a lot of people in the civil services, IAS officers, IPS officers, who are from the IITs. And 1 or 2 of them, of course, have been, sort of IAS toppers also from the IIT. And what happens is that civil services is a very different system, And therefore, one has to really ask oneself whether you really want to be much more private sector oriented and, motivated and driven by the private sector, or whether you are much more focused on being a civil services person. So really, it's a decision about as a personality where you think you are going to be a better fit. The public sector is much more risk averse, and it's much more of a steady career. So you have to decide whether that's what you want, or want something more risk taking, more entrepreneurial in the private sector.
Just to correct you, I think someone is saying Ajit Singh, son of Charan Singh, a product of IIT Kanpur, was an MP apparently. So
no, I've heard that one. I have heard
Right.
that one before. I've heard
Okay.
that one before. I have not been able to verify that whether he was BTech or MTech. So that's the thing that I haven't been able to figure out.
Okay, I think. Okay. So, Mr. Sinha, I think one of the things which I also now recently, while talking to some people, when we talk about leader, we always think of leading from the front kind of a thing. But I think now these days everybody is saying leading from behind, and I think which seems to have become very important these days, that consensus building, taking people along, and I think how do you see these changing the leadership roles these days?
Both are required, Professor Rao. There are times when you have to lead from the front, when there is tremendous risk and uncertainty, and people need you to articulate a vision, to be able to show the way. And certainly, you have to step up then, and you have to demonstrate that you can, help people find their way through a difficult sort of period. So there is definitely a role from leading from the front as well. But again, when you are in a large organization, and a lot of what you have to do is to enable other people around you to be successful, that's when you have to absolutely apply the leading from the back types of skills as well. So a good leader, to my sort of limited experience, Professor Rao, is one that can modify their style, modify their abilities to the circumstances. You have to be versatile. And to that extent, you have to be able to read the situation and apply the style you think will work best.
I think I was just looking at IIT Delhi and what I have been doing. It is from my point of view, three things are becoming very important for all of us now. One is communication. I think that is now through so many ways you need to communicate with your stakeholders. The second thing is the consensus building. Everywhere you are now, you have to be part of a committee, and then you have to take everybody along. I think that's the second C, which is becoming very important now. And the third thing is the creativity. I think coming up with new ideas all the time. I think to me these three C's seem to have become so important for the current leader. As I see from my experience right now.
No, you're absolutely right, Professor Rao. And even if you are, an IBM fellow, doing your own sort of, research and so on, even there, the three C's that you mentioned are equally important. So really, as you think about, education of our IITians, those three become very important. They have to be given the tools so that they can apply those skills and learn those skills well. A lot is expected of IITians, and IITians naturally become leaders. And because they naturally become leaders, so much is expected of them. Those three qualities are really important for them, and really necessary for them as well. So yes, I totally agree with you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. I think it is always a pleasure speaking with you. Madhavendra, I hand over to. I think he needs to take it forward.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Thank you so much for your introduction. Mr. Sinha, I've been receiving some questions, and I have one very important question for you. I think that's your forte as well, the finance, the economy. So what economists are calling it is the dichotomy of the economic revival for our country. So what that basically means is that presently there are no tax collections mostly, and then government has to continue to invest in the health sector. They have to continue to give the pensions to people. They really have to also do is give some kind of economic stimulus to the MSMEs and the corporate now, so that they can survive the future, and the economy to revive. That's going to be very, very important. Now the gross public debt that's going to rise, which economists are assuming that would have crossed the GDP by now, which I'm not sure if that is correct. But for tomorrow, with these kind of gross public debts and with continuous stimulus being doled out for the MSMEs and the corporate to survive, how do you think the economy of this country, and how long do you think it's going to take? It's going to take decades or a few years? Or do you think that the economic condition of India is going to be better when the pandemic goes on?
Yeah, so the IMF and several other forecasters have gone through these same issues that you've mentioned in terms of, declining demand, sort of fragility in the financial system, recovery that will take some time. So they've gone through all those factors. And what the IMF has projected is a 1.8% GDP growth this year, followed by a pretty sharp recovery the following year of 7.4%. And that is because obviously the drivers of growth for India are very robust on the one hand. And on the other hand, we've handled the pandemic extremely well. So because of the early lockdown, because of all the decisive, bold steps that the Honorable Prime Minister and the cabinet have undertaken, we are, I think, less hard hit by the pandemic than many other countries. And as a result of that, yes, we will see a slowdown in growth this year for sure. I mean, IMF has said 1.8% from, let's say, 6%, which is what had been forecast earlier. So there is going to be a slowdown. But at the same time, the recovery, I think, will be pretty sharp. And of course, the government is working on a series of important measures that will enable the most vulnerable groups, whom you pointed out, the rural poor, the urban poor, MSMEs, the affected sectors of the economy. All of those will get the necessary support so that they can get through this difficult period well.
Oh, Mr. Sinha, India certainly has a very strong economic roots, because earlier also we have seen that during the economic meltdowns and even during sanctions, we have survived really well. So, Mr. Sinha, I would like to be online and on time. We really have not much time left. All that remains for me to do, I mean, now is just to thank you very, very much sincerely for your time, because it's not easy to get you. You are one of the very unique and versatile leaders that IIT Delhi has, in fact, for the whole of India. But before you go, there's one question that I want to put to you. This is about the autonomy in the governance. That there are a lot of countries which are moving on to executing their governance departments on blockchain for auto executions without any interference of the third party or the government so-called. How do you think, or what do you think is the future of Indian governance in that sector? Even now, I mean, recently, even cryptocurrency has been, it's not a legal tender yet, but it's been legalized for use. So what do you think, is there any possibility that our government is going to, migrate to that kind of autonomy in the governance?
Madhavendra, our government has been at the forefront of a lot of technologies, whether it is, the direct benefit transfer platforms that we have created, whether it's the rapid rollout of 4G, now 5G coming along, getting broadband down to the panchayat level, building up our science and technology capabilities in every domain. Our government has done more for these cutting edge technologies than any government has done in the past. We've also launched major research programs for both artificial intelligence and quantum computing. So as soon as the blockchain and cryptocurrency applications come forward and it becomes clear what can be done there, I'm sure we will really push hard to enable them to be utilized so that everybody benefits from it. And of course, there are very strong benefits that come from blockchain technology, etc. So I'm quite hopeful, yes, that there will be good applications for it soon in India.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, and it's really been a very meaningful, interesting, and essential interaction with you. And like they say in the movies, when all this ends in the end, it will all look so surreal. So there will be a time when all this will be behind us, and we'll all be really proud of having survived in these times, both physically and mentally. And also, all the participants, I was just looking at, there are no more questions, I guess. And yeah, in the end, Mr. Sinha, thank you very much. And I also like to extend great thanks to Professor Ramgopal Rao. He is like what people call him, thinking professor. So thank you, Mr. Sinha, thank you really very much for your time, for your valuable time. In the end, I like to wish all the participants a good health and take good care of yourself. and Godspeed, and hope to see you soon again. And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Sinha, I hope we have your continued support for our.
You will always have my support, Madhavendra, and thank you very much for organizing it. Thank you very much to Professor Rao for participating and for everybody else who's on this video call. आप सबको बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं. आप सब स्वस्थ सुरक्षित रहें. आप और आपके परिवार के हर सदस्य को मेरी बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं. धन्यवाद.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you.